Hello, online pipe community. Ethan, Parsimonious Piper here. Today, we have got another episode of Morsels for Mental Manducation. And yes, we are diving right into the next chapter of C.S. Lewis' Mere Christianity. But first, in a 2-star carved pipe by Lee Lovett, I have got a bowl of Gawith Hogarth rum / Jamaican flake. I have got it folded and stuffed today instead of rubbed out, so in addition to my chatting, I will probably wind up having to light this a few more times. It takes a while to get it really going. Well, today we dive right into the next Christian virtue that Lewis discusses, and that is charity. The term charity has been watered down over time, so that today we primarily think of charity as giving to organizations that help the poor or that have some cause. That's what we think of as charity or charitable giving. The term originally had a much broader meaning, and in fact, if you look in the New Testament, what we often call the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, was originally translated charity and not love. But because the term became changed over time, we now talk about that as the love chapter instead of the charity chapter. Well, what is charity in the Christian sense then? Well, it is nothing other than Christian love. Let's see if we can't get this going a little better here. Now, we've touched on this briefly in a couple of different contexts already. One was forgiveness, that this is the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself involves forgiving your neighbor, just as you forgive yourself very easily for things that you've done. But more specifically, Christian love is not affection. We often confuse the two. Christian love is a choice. It is the deliberate choosing of what is good for someone else. Not necessarily above one's own interest. We're commanded to love our neighbor as ourselves, not to love our neighbor more than ourselves. There is a difference. And sometimes we also take it to that extreme, that we are somehow commanded to put everyone else above us. In a different context, we are. However, not in this context. In this context, we are to love our neighbor as ourselves, and that's hard enough as it is without going the extra step. But it is a choice. It's not an emotion. It's not an affection. Love does not mean like. In fact, you can love your neighbor and despise him at the same time. How's that so? Well, you don't have to like your neighbor at all. To love him is to do what is in your neighbor's best interest, regardless of how you feel about him. That's love in this context. We're not talking about romance. As a digression, some of you are going to ask, well, why didn't he just rub that out? Wouldn't it burn better? Yes, it would, but better being a subjective term. It will burn, once this gets lit, it will burn longer, cooler, and with more flavor than if I had rubbed it out. Anyway, we're not talking about romantic love here. We're talking about a deliberate choice. to do or want what is best for someone else, and not necessarily what you want yourself. Now, when we conflate affection, romantic love, and real love, or like and love, then we are often led into errors, into injustices. For example, we treat those that we like better than those that we don't like. This is quite natural. But care needs to be taken that we don't take it to the point where we treat the person we don't like unjustly, unfairly, in favor of those that we do like. He gives an example of the mother, the aunt, the grandmother who spoils a child. And here we're not just talking about giving the child things that are excessive, but the worst spoilage is in behavior. Not holding a child accountable for his actions. That's a lesson the child carries with it into adulthood, that he's not really accountable. Someone else is always to blame when something bad happens as a result of his poor decisions or his bad behavior. Someone else is always at fault. We see a lot of that, don't we? Not taking responsibility for one's own actions. Another example would be when the courts favor a class of people or give them lighter sentences because of a characteristic that makes them a favored group, or refuses to hand out punishment to them because they are part of a favored group. We are seeing this in America right now. That's not actually loving to the individual. Or to those around him. At any rate, that is the difference here between like and love. They are not the same thing. Now, the next thing I'm going to tell you will shock some of you. You see, we are commanded to love our neighbor. If it came naturally, it wouldn't be a commandment, right? The things that we want to do, we don't have to be prescribed from. The things we don't want to do, we don't have to be, or the things that we do want to do, we don't have to be commanded to do. We do them anyway. Loving our neighbor as ourselves is not something that comes easily. It's commanded. Taking that to the next level, however, and first, we are commanded to love God. Heart, mind, and soul. I'm going to shock some of you, as I said, by telling you this. We're not commanded to like God. We're commanded to love him. What does that look like if we don't like God? There are going to be times, I can guarantee you, when you will be frustrated, no matter the level of your faith, no matter the level of your trust. You will be frustrated with God. You will be angry with him. You will not like him. If you have never experienced that, I'm going to step out on a limb and say you haven't lived much. We're not commanded to like him. We are commanded to love God. Well, what does that look like? Well, Jesus himself told us, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. That's what loving God looks like. Doing what he wants us to do, even when we don't feel like it. Our feelings have nothing to do with this. Our will has a lot to do with it. So that in a nutshell is Christian love. It is not a fuzzy, warm feeling about God or about our neighbor. It is choosing, in God's case, to obey, in our neighbor's case, to do what's actually best for our neighbor, regardless of whether it's what we want to do for them or even what they want us to do for them, but to do what's in their best interest. That's Christian love. Well, I'm going to keep fiddling with this until I get it lit. It'll probably take another couple of relights. You guys, light something you like. Enjoy your afternoon.